Over the past couple of months, I've actually been working on something kind of like passively, just sort of every now and again. I've got this Word document that I've been opening up and just kind of adding to, going through it, just doing a little bit of research here and there. But essentially, the basic premise, the central thesis of this document that I've been working on is this idea that there exists no anti-trans argument that exists in good faith. I think most of us understand kind of instinctually that all anti-trans arguments are bad faith. But I don't think a really conclusive sort of unified statement has been made to sort of go through the major elements of the anti-trans narrative that's been kind of percolating over the past decade or so, and going through point by point and exposing what the actual intention behind the argument is. And I'm reaching a bit of a conclusion, because I had originally started working from a framework of trying to figure out, like, what are the categories of anti-trans arguments? Like, are there arguments rooted in a misunderstanding of science? Are there arguments rooted in a desire to exert cultural control? Are there arguments rooted in chauvinistic patriarchal thinking? And sort of the conclusion that I've been coming to is that there really are no categories. It's all coming from the same place, and it's all of the above. It's the same thought process that informs each of those individual segments: chauvinistic patriarchal thinking, a misunderstanding of science, a desire for cultural control. It comes from the same place that leads to all of those individual phenomenon. I guess the simplest way, the most sort of all-encompassing way to put it would be to just say it is a desire for control. Now, you could go through and start to pick out a degree of granularity in where a particular argument is coming from, what it's based in, but it's ultimately all going to be informed by the exact same idea. It all boils down to the thinly veiled bullying and dehumanization with an explicit goal to get trans people to detransition at best or commit suicide at worst. Yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal for those of us who are already around, because our existence challenges the cishet worldview. Yeah, essentially. But it's sort of this idea that trans people have only existed in the past 20 or 30 years or so. That's clearly not true. It's not even remotely accurate. And I'm not gonna do the weird thing where, like, start reaching back for, historical examples of, like, the Scythians and their alleged practice of some of their priests castrating themselves and drinking pregnant horse urine as a extremely rudimentary form of HRT. We have evidence to believe that they did that, but that's not relevant to the current discussion. It is relevant to the idea that trans people have always existed, but there are much, much closer, much more explicitly documented pre-contemporary examples of trans people existing that we can reach for, that we know the people who are currently challenging our existence right now would have been exposed to when they were young. But I landed on this epiphany, this sort of realization that I don't know who else has noticed this, but I would say in the past couple of years, there's been sort of a resurgence in, not really a resurgence, that's not the word, sort of an effort, a reclamation, if you will, of the term transsexual. Now, I use the term transsexual all the time. And I've got a very specific reason as to why I use it. I've explained this in the past, but never really kind of in the open. See, there's a pattern of thinking that you only use the term transsexual if you're a person who is seeking to complete your transition. So we're talking FFS, sex reassignment, body contouring procedures, whatever you feel like you have to go through to complete your transition so that you're no longer trans, you're just the sex you identify with. I use the term transsexual because I see it as a refutation of one of the more blatantly bad faith arguments that the bigots and the gender criticals and the transphobes like to spout. And that being the whole idea that you can't change your sex. This sort of lack of scientific literacy informing. We've all seen this before. Bigots will pop up in a space that is discussing trans people, specifically trans women. That tends to be what drives them out of the woodwork. And they'll demand to be allowed to say things like, you can't change your sex. There's no such thing as changing your sex. You're ignoring biology. You're ignoring science. Shit like that. First of all, who the fuck cares? Who cares? I know who cares. And I'll explain exactly who cares and why. But it's certainly not me. I'm not the one who cares about whether or not I can change my sex, because I have no intention of ever being a parent. So I couldn't care less about changing my sex. Now you may think, how does one thought lead itself to the other? How does the idea that you can't change your sex lead to your concern as to whether or not you're going to be a parent? It's because the people who say that you can't change your sex are operating from the most important principle behind the gender critical narrative. And that is a culturally and societally informed demand upon the individual to procreate without limitation. Yeah, Jenny, you nailed it right there on the head. With the Republicans, it all comes down to breeding. That's exactly what it is. I use the term transsexual not because I'm interested in the debate as to whether or not I can alter my sex. I use it because I reject the premise of the argument outright. It doesn't fucking matter whether or not I can change my sex. Once you really kind of dig into what it is they're trying to say, it all comes back to the idea that you need to go forth and multiply. Be fruitful. Spread your seed as far as possible. Unless you're a woman, in which case it's your responsibility to find one man to knock you up 15 times before you turn 25. Do the math on that, because there are some Republicans out there who have already done that math, and they really want that math to be the cultural norm. The term ripe and fertile has more than once been said by Republican men talking about teenage girls. They wouldn't hate abortion if only non-white people had them. It's all about racial preservation. Abortion is one of the big ones. But it has to do with all forms of reproductive autonomy. Okay? It first started to kick up. I don't know how many who are watching this or are going to watch this VOD in the future who grew up in the 80s, but you probably experienced a sort of radicalization among the Republican Party in regards to the abortion topic. That is probably the point at which most people alive today would be able to point their finger to and say that is the point in history at which the Republican Party in this country became violently radical. They do it about abortion. They really hate things like IUDs, intrauterine devices, birth control pills, day after pills. One of the big reasons why they hate sex ed in school so much is because its purpose is to teach kids how to use condoms. Like, it's about making sure that, like, Republican states, I think Texas is ranked as the worst state, not for teen pregnancy, but for repeat teen pregnancy. And they also have one of the least robust sex education, like statewide sex education programs in the entire country. But you get states where there is a robust sex education, a robust statewide sex education policy, and you don't have as many teen pregnancies. Especially not repeat teen pregnancies. I'm from North Carolina. Not only am I the second born child I am the second born child. I was born when my mother was 16. I just want you to think about that for a second. I went to school with girls who already had 2 kids by the time they graduated high school, if they graduated at all. So when bigots, transphobes, gender criticals, when they pop up into our spaces and say, you can't change your sex, what you're trying to tell me, or what you're trying to demand of me, is that I accept an obligation from society that is placed upon the individual. In that case, the obligation to procreate. That's why, yeah. I know you grew up in the States, so you didn't get quite the same cultural upbringing that I did, Elle. But yeah, over in North Carolina, the kids did some fucking. Breeding like goddamn rabbits down there. I'm not joking when I say there was a girl I graduated with who had 2 kids. One of them was a toddler and was walking at walking age and walked with his mother across the stage to the podium to get her diploma. While her mother had the infant with her in the crowd. What's being placed upon the individual in this case from society, from culture, is an expectation of procreation. There's an obligation for the individual by their means to procreate as much as humanly possible. There's a reason why you have these pronatalists popping up. And they're getting money. They're getting monetary backing. That's why you're seeing the government is now like, what was it? Trump was like, we'll give $5,000 to every woman that like has a baby or whatever. The natalists are going fucking wild right now. And it has to do with their fear of white replacement. Or at least that's a big element of it. But there's also, you also can't discount motivations like the quiverful movement. Both sides of my grandparents had lots of kids, so I have lots of uncles and aunts. I never met the full breadth of my extended family. I know that I've got literally dozens of uncles and aunts. Like, the family is vast and extensive. But that's kind of the point I want to land on, is you've got this idea that you need to be breeding as much as possible. And for a lot of these people, it is race motivated, especially people like Elon Musk, who are supporters of white replacement theory, or who are propagators of white replacement theory, who he himself has had over a dozen kids. It's not unreasonable to assert that his meltdown and like his entire thing about taking over Twitter and going on this like multiple $1 million crusade against trans people being part of the American government is because of his oldest kid transitioning. If you look into the family history of Elon Musk, what you will find is that he has been inculcated into technocratic, Nazi-esque, white eugenicist ideology literally from birth. He's always been this way. And now we're seeing the end game of it. So the question becomes, at what point do we shift from allowing society and culture to place upon the individual a set of rigid, blanketed expectations, to understanding that expectations placed upon the individual need to be informed by an ethical question slightly more robust than, well, what about what everyone else thinks? When do we get to a point at which we tell ourselves that we are in control of our lives? When are we going to stop allowing vibes, basically, to dictate how we shape our own personal existence? Hi, Chad, I'm free from school for the summer. Hooray. What are we talking about? I have no idea. Endgame, wait till we get to the secret. Wait a minute. I don't want to play this game no more. Oh, the only way to win is to not play. Unfortunately, participation has become mandatory. Mandatory fun day, everybody. Fun, fucked up nation. The reason why I use the term transsexual, why I'm not particularly offended by people using the word transsexual, and something that I'm secretly kind of excited about, because I've been seeing this idea coalesce in the larger trans community recently, is that we use the term transsexual because we don't give a fuck what anyone thinks. It's my fucking body. I choose to alter it, be it chemically, surgically, in whatever way I see fit. That it is basically pointing the middle finger in the face of people that will come into our space and say, you will never be a woman, or you cannot change your sex. Because it's throwing it back in their face and saying, didn't fucking ask. I just worry about using it because it feels like a thing right-wingers say to sexualize us. That's fair, but at the same time, that's one of those things where you really cannot let them own the narrative. Because that is one of their tactics. I can't help but to associate it with transmed pick-me bullshit. Yeah, that's who was using it for a time, but like I said, I've been seeing a lot of people within the greater trans community use the term and use it specifically as a weapon against the gender criticals for exactly the purpose that I've been talking about, of using it as a refutation of the people who try to say that we don't understand biology and that we are fighting against science. It's basically saying to them, okay, you've got this argument. It doesn't fucking matter. Even if it was true, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to do this anyway. And that's kind of where I've been landing with this on it. As to your point, Stella, about the, like, they use it as a term to sexualize us. And why I say, like, stop letting Republicans, stop letting conservatives be the ones to frame these issues or to dominate the narrative. I want you to think about this. I think this is obvious, what I'm about to say. There is a level of irony that I think very rarely actually gets pointed out when you've got bigots coming to us to say that we don't understand biology and that we are fighting against science. I say this frequently, but you should never concede the premise to right-wingers because of how often their arguments are based in bad faith. But this is one of those times where chemtrails, weather control, flat earth, exactly what I'm getting to. This is one of those times where even trying to discuss how their understanding of transsexualism is wrong is conceding the premise to them. It is giving them validity, at least in their own minds, by trying to answer to their questions. Because it's just asking questions bullshit. It's jack-offery. Right? You're conceding the premise the second you allow them to bait you into a topic, into a discussion of the science. Because I want you to think about this. They're not asking questions. They never were. They have a conclusion in mind already. And they're especially not interested in the science. They never are. What science do these people actually believe? Well, they reject climate change. They reject vaccine science, germ theory, microbiology. They want you drinking unpasteurized milk, for fuck's sake. Evolution, that's on the chopping block. Do you really think if the consolidation of power is allowed to complete, that they're going to allow evolution to continue being taught in schools? Fuck no, that shit's out of here. Darwin? Never heard of him. Flat Earth and geocentric models of cosmology are on the rise again. What about computer science? What about computer science? Well, computer science is increasingly dominated by people that are following the every whims of generative AI, almost as if it's becoming a cult. I am an advocate for pasteurized milk. Do not drink it unprocessed. Yeah, no, do not drink unpasteurized milk. You're going to fucking die of some easily preventable disease. So these people, they don't believe in science. They don't care about science, especially if it's science that is going to punch a hole in their social framework. They don't agree with science. They want science to agree with them. Does the name Galileo ring any bells? The religious institution, which just so happens to be the dominant driving force behind the current push for right-wing authoritarianism, when it has control, when it gains control, it suppresses the humanities, it suppresses the sciences. Why, if they are not going to engage with other scientific fields in good faith, would they engage with trans science in good faith? They won't. So you'll be like desperately trying to cite statistics and the work of scientists doing real research into the trans issue. Meanwhile, they can just fire hose a complete just avalanche of bullshit at you that you can't possibly all address. Something known as the Gish Gallop. I can't remember what's the guy's first name? Andrew Gish? Anthony Gish? Dwayne Gish. Oh, I was way off. During a typical Gish gallop, the galloper confronts an opponent with a rapid series of specious arguments, half-truths, misrepresentations, and outright lies, making it impossible for the opponent to refute them all within the format of the debate. Each point raised by the Gish galloper takes considerably longer to refute than to assert. The technique wastes an opponent's time and may cast doubt on the opponent's debating ability for an audience unfamiliar with the technique, especially if no independent fact-checking is involved or if the audience has limited knowledge of the topics. Does anybody remember when Matt Walsh was on Joe Rogan, for example? Matt Walsh is notorious for this. As a matter of fact, most of these people are notorious for this. Ben Shapiro is also really bad for this. He will Gish gallop his audience in his own videos. But the example that just sprang to mind, or at least the effect, the ultimate effect of this technique, especially used in the vacuum that these people operate in, was when Matt Walsh got on Joe Rogan and made the claim that millions of kids are being transed in public schools. I know that's a lie. You know that's a lie. Joe fucking Rogan knew that was a lie. He knew it was a lie the second Matt said it. And you know what he did? He pushed back on it. Oddly enough, like a blinkering moment of sanity. And said, "Oh, that doesn't sound right. Jamie, why don't you, he pulled his Jamie, look this up thing." And then his producer came back a few minutes later and was like, "Yeah, it's been like a couple thousand kids over the past like 10 years have actually gone through gender affirming care." Matt Walsh didn't walk back his statement and say, "Oh, I was misinformed. It's, the situation, the issue is not as bad as I thought it was." He fucking doubled down. He doubled down in the face of somebody who is his ideological ally. But because his narrative so strongly depends on the fear of being able to sell his audience on the idea that millions of kids are being transed, that even in the face of evidence being told by somebody fact-checking him in that moment, he's going to sit there and say some things like, "Well, it just kind of makes sense that it's, it's been at least hundreds of thousands of kids within the past year or so have been transitioned." That's what we're dealing with. You've got people who are so comfortable with the act of lying about trans issues that even when they get fact-checked to their face, they're going to continue following the party line. They're going to continue following the narrative. Meanwhile, we, on the other hand, are bound by facts. They are not. So why engage them in a scientific debate? They're not going to address anything that we say honestly. So why give them the time of day? Now, obviously, I realize that that's one of those easier said than done moments. But it's why I constantly say don't concede the premise. You have to be really careful about how and when you actually interact with these people. Because they will not operate in good faith. They will lie. They will fire hose you with bullshit. They know it's bullshit, but they know you can't answer to every single thing in the amount of time that they are going to afford you. They seek to overwhelm you with bullshit because they have nothing but bullshit. And it's part of the reason why I say there does not exist a single good faith anti-trans argument. It doesn't happen. And if you want more examples of this, of how the facts don't matter, and as a matter of fact, facts are counter to what they want. Let's take the Cass review, and let's take the Utah State University meta-analysis that just released. On the one hand, you've got Hillary Cass and the team that she put together, commissioned by the UK government, specifically to analyze the effect of gender-affirming care on trans youth. The scientific community said that the study was malformed and reached an incorrect conclusion. The medical industry has come forward to say that the study was malformed and came to an incorrect conclusion. Advocacy groups across the world have come out and said that the study was malformed and came to an incorrect conclusion. But the UK government said, "Great, this sounds good." It's gotten to the point where Hillary Cass is now in the center of a lawsuit. She's the defendant of a lawsuit accusing her of having to destroy records in order to support the conclusion of the Cass review. The UK government is currently being accused right now through the NHS of destroying, or at the very least suppressing, records of trans minors committing suicide because of the lack of care. Because either the wait times are literal years, or because they're just now getting to the point where they can receive the health care that they really need. And what's been happening recently has pulled that away from them. And now they don't have that option anymore. So Keir Starmer, Queer Harmer, is allegedly urging the UK government to destroy that data, to suppress that data whenever possible. The data that trans kids in the UK are becoming increasingly suicidal in the face of things like the Cass Review and the UK Supreme Court judgment. On the other hand, when Utah Republicans passed a ban on gender-affirming healthcare for children and teens in 2023, they argued it was needed to protect vulnerable kids from treatments that could cause long-term harm. Years later, the results of a study commissioned under the same law contradict that claim, and the Republican-led legislature is facing pressure to reconsider the restrictions. Utah's Department of Health and Human Services and experts from the state's leading health organizations concluded from a study of thousands of transgender people that gender-affirming care generated positive mental health and psychosocial functioning outcomes. Utah State is attempting to suppress this study because, again, facts are counter to their narrative. They can't be having them pesky old facts out there supporting trans people existing. So again, facts don't matter to these people. They are not interested in science. As a matter of fact, they hate science. They especially hate science that they can't manipulate to agree with them. They do not argue in good faith. They never will argue in good faith. Do not argue the statistics. Do not argue the science. Simply tell them, don't care, didn't ask, fuck off and die transphobe. Stop letting them own the narrative. Stop letting them own the debate. It's just a little bit amusing to me that I finish off my rant on the theme song for the character that I take my name from. Let's take a look-see at Matt Walsh, transphobe extraordinaire. They truly are not sending their best.
Barely exist anymore because they've all become transgender. They've all barely exist anymore because they've all become transgender. This is what they do now. There are a lot of people, doctors who got into the medical field and they did a certain thing, and then the transgender stuff came along, and that's their whole, that's what they do. Well, it's the same for a lot of plastic surgeons. That this is basically their whole business now, is doing the gender surgeries. And so you see the incentive for them. I mean, they have staked everything on this. They've also staked their professional
counterpoint. Matt Walsh clearly has no fucking idea how hard trans-affirming surgical procedures are still being gate-kept, even in states which he would characteristically think are overrun by trans people. It is not easy to get these procedures done, let alone covered by insurance, and trans people, especially now, are incredibly underemployed. We are considered unemployable, and as such, we are underinsured. Even if we do have insurance, which I have insurance, there is a chance that when I am finally approved for all of my surgical processes, I'm going to have to pay a tremendous amount of money out of pocket. That is burdensome. It makes it more difficult for us. There are no surgeons that I know of just handing this shit out like candy. Insurance won't even cover hair removal. You think we'll get bottom surgery approved? I don't know. Because, like, my insurance, I can't get hair removal covered, like, out of pocket, but I can get it reimbursed as long as I meet my annual deductible.
reputation, because that's the other problem. Not only is it the political incentive and the money, but if they admit that they're wrong, then they're also admitting that they have horribly disfigured and abused thousands, maybe millions of kids.
How many people?
There's the millions of kids claim. Watch this happen in real time.
Have had this done?
Depends on what. I don't think we have exact numbers, but it's, if we're talking about the drugs, it's, I mean, millions.
If we're talking about the drug, he's talking about the HRT. Specifically in this case, puberty blockers. Puberty blockers is the scare word that the Republicans are using right now. Matt Walsh has been on this puberty blocker shit, like, this came out 2 years ago. That's how long this has been going on.
You're talking about hormone blockers.
Yeah.
Millions of
blockers
kids have been on hormone blockers? Really?
I'm sure someone's going to fact check me on me, but my
Did you see what just happened? All Joe Rogan had to do was like, millions of kids, really? And then immediately Matt's like, well, you know, I'm sure somebody's going to fact check, but you know, it's got to be a lot. It's got to be a lot of kids. Let's keep watching.
My guess is that we're into the millions now at this point. Yeah, that would be my guess. I can say for double mastectomies, I read a report recently that there were over 1,000 done between 2016 and 2019, and when you compare that to how many were done between 2008 and
26 to 2019, over 1,000 double mastectomies. Over 4 years, that's 250 a year. I promise you that a large number of those were cis girls who had medical issues, which is something that's going to become increasingly common under completely deregulated environmental destruction that's going to occur thanks to the Trump administration. The whole microplastics are in everything now. You really think that's not going to have an effect? You really think an incredibly delicate, sensitive mass of tissue on the human body is not going to be affected by that and cause people to have to go through surgical processes at a much higher rate than we used to have to do? Really? Cis women get them too, dumbass. Huge tits are no bueno for backs. Yeah, right? I'm like still firmly in C-cup territory. My back is fucking killing me.
15, it's a massive increase. And over 1,000 girls had gender-affirming double mastectomies in that time frame.
And when you
but
say girls, you're talking about prepubescent?
Right, minors. And that's just up until 2019. And then we know that there's been this exponential increase with all this stuff year over year. So
this is that narrative point about, I'm going to talk about this here in just a minute too. The idea that, trans is a social contagion, in that we've never seen anything like this before.
It's a lot. It's too many. Having this happen to one kid is way too many. It's a lot more than one.
Yeah. And look, if you're an adult and you want to do that and you understand who you are and what you are and this is how you feel you should progress, you're an adult. This is a free country. You should be able to do whatever you want. But when you're talking about doing that to children, the fact that so many people are on board and so many people are angry, if you have, people are going to be angry at us that we're having these conversations.
Yeah, they will be. And I also, I actually think that that this shouldn't be happening to.
It's a very small number, if that's right.
It says over the last 5 years, there were at least 4,780 adolescents who started puberty blockers.
4,000? That's a little bit smaller than millions, Matty boy.
But
that would be a big undercounting.
Less than 1,000 people a year.
Yeah.
Watch what Matt says.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess, hundreds of thousands at this, but I could be wrong.
I would guess hundreds of thousands. Again, facts don't matter to these people. These people don't fucking care about facts. Matt Walsh is a fucking idiot. Really? Oh my God. Yeah, Matt Walsh, ladies and gentlemen. The transphobes are sending their brightest. It just so happens to be Matt fucking Walsh. The arguments haven't changed either. It's still about protecting the women's and the mutilation, the kids being mutilated. It's the same tired bullshit they drag out every time. Yeah, nobody can see that. Okay. We are going to take a break. I'm going to divert. And we're going to talk about something that actually is a lot more positive and a little bit more fun and interesting, but also serves to, again, dismantle the anti-trans narrative. We're going to do that in just a minute. I am going to be right back. I need to take a pee break.